When I was 15, I used to think my family was just a little dramatic, not broken, just loud, proud, and a bit emotionally clumsy. But by the time I turned 23, I understood that some families don't accidentally hurt you. They aim. My name S. Mason, and last month I passed my welding certification exam. It took 6 years of odd jobs, night shifts, and early mornings at community college to get there. 6 years of sweating through steel fumes and holding flashcards while my hands were too tired to grip a coffee mug. And the night before my exam, the single most important day of my life, my mom cornered me in the kitchen and said, "Your brother needs help moving his couch." I wish that was a joke. I didn't grow up thinking I was the invisible one. It just sort of happened slowly, like a water leak under the floorboards. My older brother Chase was always the golden child. He was the kid who got his name painted on the wall above his bed, complete with a little football and 2 stars on either side, while I shared a room with peeling wallpaper and a bunk bed that creaked like it was begging to be put down. Chase was 3 years older than me, and somehow always 3 steps ahead. When he barely graduated high school, my parents threw him a backyard barbecue. When I made the Dean S list my first semester, Mom glanced at the email and said, "That is nice, honey. Can you take the trash out? Chase didn't really do school." He floated between jobs like a leaf in the wind, gym receptionist, then real estate intern, then something involving cryptocurrency that never quite made sense, and ended with him accidentally maxing out Dad's second credit card. Meanwhile, I picked up weekend shifts at the scrapyard and studied on breaks because welding didn't come easy to me, and neither did sleep. I am not the genius type. I am the grinded out type, the one who gets up at 5 and learns by repetition. But in my house, Chase could breathe wrong and get praised for his lung capacity. I could be bleeding from both hands and get asked why I was making a mess. It wasn't all bad, I guess. My grandma, Dad's mom, was the only one who seemed to see me. She used to call me Maze the Maker because I was always building things, even with scraps, but she passed away when I was 17, and whatever small buffer I had from the family hierarchy went with her. After that, I was just the spare son, the helper, the errand runner, the one who always had time because apparently, having goals was real unless you wore a suit or posted about it on Instagram. And Chase, he moved into an overpriced apartment last year with his girlfriend, now ex. And when that imploded, because of course it did, he decided to downgrade to something more modest. That modest place was a duplex 25 minutes across town with a second floor walk up and a couch that, apparently, weighed as much as his ego. He waited until the night before my exam to mention it. I was in the living room cross-legged on the carpet with my notes spread out like a shrine to pipe angles and safety coats. He walked in like he still lived there. Technically, he moved out, but the house still had his scent, expensive cologne, and entitlement. "Yo, Maze," he said, flicking a rolled-up pair of socks at my leg like we were 12 again. "Need your help tomorrow. Morning couch is a beast." I blinked at him. "Tomorrow, as my welding test," he paused. "Oh, right. You are still doing that." Still doing that? I looked over at my mom, who was making tea in the kitchen. She hadn't said anything yet. She didn't even glance at me. "I've been studying for months," I said carefully, trying not to sound defensive. "I need to be there at 8 sharp. "It is the practical exam," Chase groaned. "Dude, it is just one morning. I am not asking for a kidney." That is when Mom turned around and finally chimed in. She didn't yell. Not yet. Her voice was sweet. That fake calm she used when she was winding up for something worse. "Honey, your brother's trying to build a real life. He can do everything on his own." My hands went cold, and I am not. She didn't answer. Just gave me that tired look, like I was being dramatic for even daring to put myself on the same playing field. Then she added, "I just think you could reschedule. Or skip it. There LLB other tests." I laughed. Actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unreal. "I've already paid the fee, and you can reschedule it for another 6 months. This is my shot." Mom set her mug down harder than necessary. "So you are saying no?" "I am saying I can I want tea." And that is when the screaming started. She snapped like a rubber band, pulled too tight. "He is trying to build something for himself. You are just playing pretend with your little metal toys, welding. Really? You think that is a real job? You think that is going to take care of you?" Every part of me wanted to shrink, but something else, something sharp, started to rise in my chest. I stood up slowly, and for once I didn't apologize. I didn't beg to be understood. I just picked up my notes, walked past Chase, and headed to my room. My dad, silent as always, pretended to scroll on his phone in the hallway. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking, maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should have just helped and rescheduled, but then I remembered all the times I'd been the one bending, the one saying yes, the one putting myself second so that Chase could be first, again and again and again. So I packed my things. Not all of them, just enough. My boots, my helmet, my notes, and my favorite hoodie, the one with the scorched sleeves from that summer. I helped her wire a metal barn roof, and I left. Quietly, no speech, no drama. Just a front door closing at 1:47 a.m. and the sound of my old Civic starting in the driveway. I slept in my car that night, and the next morning, I passed my welding exam. I figured that would be the end of it, that they'd ignore me, like usual. pretend I was just having a phase, and wait for me to come crawling back with an apology and a wrench in hand. But that is not what happened, because when I left, I took more than my backpack with me. I took the last thread holding their illusion of normalcy together. And without me there to prop it all up, their whole little house of cards began to collapse. But I didn't know that yet. Not then. I was just a guy with a certification, a sleeping bag, and a quiet kind of rage that I'd spent years swallowing. A rage that was finally starting to grow teeth. For the next few days after I passed my welding exam, I floated in this weird limbo between exhaustion and pride. I hadn't told anyone at home, no text to mom, no call to Chase, not even a hey, I passed. It felt too sacred to share with people who would just roll their eyes or nod politely and ask if I'd considered getting a business degree instead. I just kept to myself, crashing on a buddy, sold futon, nursing coffee like it was for fluid, and thinking for the first time in years that maybe, just maybe, I could have a real life that belonged to me. I figured they'd try to contact me. That there'd be at least a half-hearted attempt from someone in the family to pretend like they cared, but radio silence, not even a thumbs up emoji from dad, which, if you know my dad, is communication. The only ping I got was from Chase, 2 days later. Didn't he expect you to actually flake? Nice. No question about the test, no acknowledgement of what I'd been working toward for years. Just that. I didn't respond. Then a week later, the guilt campaign began. It started with a text from mom. They made your point. Can you please stop punishing your family for loving you? I stared at the message for a full minute before setting my phone down without replying loving me. That is what that was. Screaming at me for prioritizing my future, dismissing my entire career path as pretend. They had a funny way of showing love. And suddenly, I was very tired of explaining myself to people who never listened. But I should have known that silence wasn't going to be enough. The next morning, I got a call from Aunt Marcy, Mom's sister. We weren't close, but she'd always been decent to me in a distant smile, at Thanksgiving kind of way. So when I picked up, I expected small talk. Instead, she sighed heavily and said, Mason, I just got off the phone with your mom. What is going on? I blinked, sitting up straighter. What do you mean, what is going on? She is in tears, says you. Be gone completely off the rails. She said you cursed her out and stormed out in the middle of the night. Mason, you know she has been through a lot lately. You can just abandon your family. I was so stunned I actually laughed. What, that is what she said, Marcy replied. That you are having a rebellious episode, that you are staying with strangers, and refusing to come home, strangers. I was staying with Caleb, my best friend since middle school. His couch had more family value than half the hugs I ever got growing up. She is lying. I said, my voice flat. I didn't curse at anyone. I just told them I could skip my welding certification. And then she screamed that I wasn't building a real life, so I left. Quietly, there was a long pause. Then Marcy cleared her throat. Well, that is not what she told the rest of us. And that was the moment it clicked. They weren't just trying to guilt me into coming back. They were trying to rewrite the story, to make me the unstable one. The ungrateful son who stormed out instead of the one who finally stood up for himself. And in that version of the story, Chase got to stay the hero, the one who tried, who needed help. And I was the one who caused pain. I ended the call pretty quickly after that. I wasn't rude, but I didn't sugarcoat things either. And Aunt Marcy, she didn't say much in return. I could tell she didn't want to get involved. 2 days later, Chase posted a picture on Facebook. Big thanks to all the real ones who showed up and helped me move. Appreciate the love. In the photo, he is standing next to 2 of his gym buddies, smiling like he just landed a movie deal. And in the comments, Mom wrote, so proud of you, sweetie. Starting your new life with integrity and grace. Grace, integrity, that was it. That was the moment I felt it, the snapping point, not anger, not even sadness, just this deep, bone-level clarity. They weren't ever going to understand, and worse, they didn't want to. They liked the story where I was the bitter failure, too stubborn to see how good I had it. It was cleaner that way, easier to digest, but I wasn't going to play along. That week, this started making moves. Caleb hooked me up with a guy he knew at a fabrication shop across town. It wasn't fancy, but the pay was decent, and they needed welders who actually knew what they were doing. I showed up with my certification in hand and a fire in my gut. The foreman shook my hand, looked at my sleeve burns, and said, "You'll fit right in." It wasn't glamorous. I burned through gloves faster than I could replace them. My boots smelled like molten metal by day 3, and my lunch breaks were 10 minutes of silence in a gravel parking lot. But for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending. I was building something, earning my way, and still nothing from home. No congrats, no, how is the job? Just silence, except the occasional text from Mom that read like passive-aggressive greeting cards. Family isn't supposed to be this hard. You used to have such a kind heart. Don't let strangers turn you against your blood. Blood, they loved that word when it suited them. Then came the phone call I didn't expect. I was 3 weeks into the new job when Dad called me. Actual call, not a text, and said, "We need to talk. In person." I hesitated, but something in his voice sounded off, so I agreed. We met at a diner halfway between my place and theirs. I showed up in my work boots and a sweatshirt I hadn't tea-washed in 2 days. He came in wearing his old windbreaker, looking like he hadn't tea-slept. We sat. The silence was thick. Then he said, "Your brother got fired." I didn't say anything. He made some bad calls with that crypto nonsense. Spent more than he made. His lease fell through. He needs a place to stay. I stared at him. Okay. Dad looked uncomfortable. Your mother and E were hoping he could move back into the house for a while, just until he gets back on his feet. I almost laughed again. That is fine. It is your house. Dad rubbed his temples. Thing is, we were hoping you could move back too. Help out with bills. You know, chip in. There it was. The real reason. They wanted me to fund Chase's comeback tour. I leaned back in the booth. Let me get this straight. He blew his rent, lost his job, and now you want me to help pay the mortgage while he sleeps in his old bed and plays entrepreneur in the living room. Dad didn't. Answer. I just got certified. I am finally working. I have a shot at something, and you want me to give that up for him. He is your brother, Dad said. He needs us. I looked him dead in the eye and said, so did I, and then I got up and left. I didn't cry. Not in the car. Not back at Caleb's. But something inside me finally settled. A decision. A turning point. I was done begging to be seen. Done auditioning for a role I was never going to get. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, when I thought the absurdity had peaked, it happened. The betrayal. It came in the form of a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. I got home from work one evening, and Caleb handed it to me. Eyebrows raised. Looks official, he said. From your parents. I opened it with grease. Stained fingers. Inside was a formal notice. Not legal, but close. A typed-up message on letterhead that said, essentially, we decided it is time to make some financial changes. Since Chase is in transition, we allowed him to sublet your old room. In order to access your remaining belongings, please coordinate with him directly. Any items unclaimed by the end of the month will be considered forfeited. I read it 3 times. They gave my room, to Chase. Without even asking, without a word. And the cherry on top. Chase had signed the bottom of the letter. Just a little signature, scribbled in blue ink, like it was a business deal. I didn't go into Caleb's house that night. Not right away. I stood on his porch for a good 20 minutes, just staring at the letter, reading it, rereading it, trying to convince myself I misunderstood something, anything, that maybe it was a joke, a prank, a twisted way of calling me back home. But it wasn't it was real, typed, signed, and mailed with intention. They gave my room to Chase. They erased me, again, like I'd been a placeholder until their real son got back on track. I walked down to the curb and sat on the edge of the street, arms on my knees, let her crumpled in my fist. That is when I realized it was already creased down the middle, folded carefully, deliberately, which meant someone, probably my mom, sat down at a table, typed it all out, and folded it like she was sending a wedding invite. There was no hesitation, no conflict. Just quiet dismissal. That was my rock bottom. Not the letter, not even the room. It was realizing I had been so easy to cut out that they didn't even bother lying to soften the blow. They didn't say temporarily. They didn't say we hope you understand. They used the word forfeited. Like my life was a package left too long on their porch. Returned to cinder. I didn't tell Caleb that night. Just nodded when he asked if I was good and went into the guest room. I laid on the pullout, turned toward the wall, and let the weight of everything settle on top of me like the ceiling had caved in. Over the next few days, I didn't talk much. I went to work, welded whatever needed welding, and kept my head down. I didn't mention the letter. Didn't bring up Chase. I think Caleb sensed something was wrong. He is the kind of friend who knows when to back off. But I could feel myself shrinking, like I was becoming someone else, someone quieter, numb. There was one night, though, when I snapped a little. We were watching television, some dumb cooking show, and the host said something like, "You've got to know your worth before anyone else does," I muttered, without thinking, unless your family convinces you at 0. Caleb muted the television. "Okay," he said, not unkindly. "Tell me what happened," so I did. I told him everything. The fight before the exam, the silence after, the guilt texts, the Facebook post, the diner conversation with my dad, and finally, the letter. He didn't say anything right away, just looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Maze, they not your family. Not anymore. They your origin story." It hit me like a steel beam to the chest, because he was right. I'd spent years thinking he was a defective piece of the puzzle, trying to force myself into a space that was never shaped for me. But maybe the point wasn't to fit. Maybe the point was to build my own damn table. The next morning, I asked my foreman if I could take on extra shifts. I told him I needed the hours. He looked at me, grinned, and said, "You are not going to sleep for a month, kid. You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I am sure." That month, I worked harder than I ever had. Early mornings, late nights, weekends, I took every scrap shift no one wanted. I welded through blisters, skipped lunch breaks, and poured myself into the work like I was trying to burn the pain out of my system. And slowly, quietly, it started to help. The noise in my head dulled. The ache in my chest softened. I was still angry, still hurt, but I was also moving. And then, about 5 weeks into that grind, something unexpected happened. I got promoted, not officially, no title, no raise yet.